Congresswoman Virginia Fox, 5th District, North Carolina. And again, www.fox.house.gov/healthcare, and you can see some of the alternatives that are being proposed by different representatives. So again, if you'd like to call in, 986-6397, and go ahead and continue with some news.
This is something we had covered earlier in the week, and we would like to cover it again here for our Saturday listeners. Ex-Ohio Congressman Trafficant freed from prison. This is from the Associated Press. Former Ohio Representative James Trafficant walked out of a Minnesota prison Wednesday morning after serving a 7-year sentence for bribery and racketeering. He now faces a 3-year period of probation. He hasn't said whether he will retire or return to public life. Trafficant, 68, was one of Congress's most colorful members, known for his hair and his references to Star Trek, including floor speeches typically punctuated with the phrase, "Beam me up."
And if you're not familiar with the story of James Trafficant, he was an 8-time congressman, sheriff before he became a congressman. He was very outspoken. I can't say whether he was guilty or not guilty of the crimes that they charged him with. I do find it very interesting that he was singled out and railroaded like he was. My take on it is he's no bigger crook than the court that tried him. I'd like to just read a little excerpt in the name of James Trafficant of what he said on the House floor, and just listen to the volumes he spoke. And I'm quoting, "The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status in name only under emergency war powers. With the constitutional republic form of government now dissolved, the receivers of the bankruptcy have adopted a new form of government for the United States. This new form of government is known as a democracy. Being an established socialistic communistic order under new governor for America, this act was instituted and established by transferring and or placing the office of the Secretary of the Treasury to that of the Governor of the International Monetary Fund. Public Law 94-564, page 8, section HR 13955 reads in part, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury receives no compensation for representing the United States." And what he is saying here is that since 1933, the Secretary of the Treasury has acted as the receivership of the bankruptcy of the United States under the war powers, and I think that is the reason that James Trafficant had to spend 8 years in prison and was taken down like he was.
Compared to many of his comrades, Trafficant was a Boy Scout, even if he was 100% guilty.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've seen sex scandals and all kinds of robbery.
The Page scandal.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, they didn't oust them out of Congress. He was thrown out of Congress.
It's okay to rape children in Congress, but if you speak out on the war powers or the bankruptcy for the United States, well, you're going to jail.
And I don't know all the facts, but they charged him with having some people paint his fence, and he wasn't paying Social Security, and he took some gifts that he wasn't supposed to take. I don't know all the specifics. I won't pretend to be an expert on it. But I will say once again that, in my opinion, he was no bigger crook than the court that tried him, and he was railroaded, and I'm glad to see he's out. We're going to do our best to try to get him on at some point. I think the media will be after him here for the next few weeks, but once it dies down, I'd like to get his take on everything, because the War Powers Act, I had watched Trafficant through the 90s and early 2000s when they were railroading him, and then in the Obama deception when Wayne Paul said what he did, it coincided perfectly with what Trafficant had said in the early 90s, and it started putting the pieces of the puzzle in place. So again, if you're not familiar with the story of James Trafficant, former congressman, and he actually ran for Congress while he was in prison, and got 15% of the vote. But one of the few people that's ever done that. But it is a very interesting story, and it goes to the heart of some of the problems here in America. This is in the news this past week, Brian. Doctor admits to euthanizing patients during Katrina. This is being reported by the Associated Press, a doctor who was working the rounds in New Orleans Memorial Medical Center during Hurricane Katrina has admitted euthanizing patients during a crucial shortage of energy and supplies at the hospital. And despite the revelations, the state prosecution in Louisiana says it will not reopen an investigation into the matter, being reported by the Associated Press. The doctor's admission comes forth on the 4th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina making landfall on the Gulf Coast. So I thought that was just amazing. Here we've got a doctor admitted that he was murdering people, and the Louisiana prosecution or prosecutor's office is saying, well, you know, we'll just let that be bygones.
Can't treat them, kill them.
So our goal here is to report some of the news that you don't see in the mainstream press. And before we went to break, I'd said CNBC had reported 1,000 banks to fail in the next 2 years. The U.S. banking system will lose some 1,000 institutes over the next 2 years, says John Canis, whose private equity firm bought Bank United of Florida in May. We've already lost 81 this year, he told CNBC. The numbers are climbing every day. Many of these institutions nobody's even heard of. Some of them are smaller companies. So once again, we're seeing the consolidation of the banking industry, all by design, exactly like what they want to have happen. We have a phone call. We're joined by Mike. How you doing today, Mike? What's on your mind?
Oh, not a whole lot, friend. How you doing today? Hey, I just wanted to call and commend you on the start of your War Powers Act. I've been looking forward to that, and I'm glad you're on it.
Hey, I appreciate it. I hate we had a couple technical issues, but you can go to our website and you can listen to FDR's speech, and I urge everyone to do that because it speaks volumes. I know it was a little long, maybe a little boring, but we wanted to get all that information out there, and now it's out. Jim will have it on YouTube, and everyone can follow it. But your thoughts on it?
Oh, fair and it's real information. You know, maybe it's a little slow, but and maybe some people consider it boring, but it's the real news. It's real information. It's not just a little bit of truth and a little bit of lies like we get fed so often by some of the so-called patriot news people. And I'm glad to see you doing it, and I look forward to the rest of the month.
Well, I appreciate it. We've put forth a lot of effort. We tried our best. I feel like this is the true conspiracy. This is the suppressed knowledge, and we can't come up with solutions unless we can address the problems. And what I just read here, Trafficant said, he was a congressman in '93, and he was going back to the war powers, saying our Constitution was under suspension. And I hope that everyone that has emailed or called and said that, this is insane, you're crazy, don't do this, will now start to take a look at the evidence and see that it has a little bit of validity.
Oh, yes, sir, most definitely. And if Trafficant knows about it and Wayne Paul knows about it, then what does that tell you about the other people who probably know about it and just ain't saying nothing? Even a former person that we all tried to vote for, maybe Ron Paul. It'd be interesting to see if he knows anything about it, because this looks like the true conspiracy, and they've been able to keep it suppressed and indoctrinate people over the past 70-some years.
Well, coming up in our series here, we're going to have Senator John McCain of Arizona admitting all this, just coming out and saying, yes, this is correct.
And so they've been able to show how much bought and paid for your local and state and federal representatives are. You know, if McCain knows about it, Trafficant knows about it, Wayne Paul knows about it, well, then there's got to be lots of others who know about it. But for the love of money, they definitely ain't saying much about it.
Well, I agree with you, and I feel like the set of circumstances that brought this all to light was more than mere happenstance, and I'm hoping that, I know Dr. Gene Schroeder is going to shed some light on this, but I hope that the people will take a good hard look and take this serious, because I don't think there's much more that's more important than trying to restore our Constitution, because without it, our president, like we said, can just operate as a dictator, and has been and will continue.
Oh, sure, and it's like you said, you can't fix something that's wrong unless you know what's wrong with it. And it's amazing. I have just about lost all confidence in the so-called truth and patriot movement. I mean, I'm going to say something that's going to aggravate everybody, but they're too busy following people like your Alex Jones and your Tex Mars and Jim Mars and such as that. Farron, I remember going to the gun shows in the 90s. This War Powers Act, they've been able to suppress pretty well